here at UNGA this week, the world finally agreed on the Global Digital Compact, and included in that was some of the work we've been doing on the UN high-level body on AI to think about how we make sure that the digital divide doesn't also become the AI divide. So one of the things perhaps we can talk about is this question of how do we make sure that Africa can fully participate and not only to capture the incredible possibilities from AI, but also doesn't get left behind. Because I see, for example, the fact that we already have a massive digital infrastructure gap. We don't have broadband everywhere. We don't have connectivity everywhere. We don't have access to compute. We have all these gaps. How do we make sure we address those gaps? And some of that is going to require financing too. So I'm curious, how do you think about how...
No, I think, James, the work that you all doing at your company is fantastic, and we have a partnership together with you on this issue. Look, the AI is here. AI is changing the world, right? I think there was an assessment done by PwC that shows that the AI will add about $116 trillion to the global economy by 2030. And in the case of Africa, if you take my country, Nigeria, or you take Ghana, or you take South Africa or Kenya, probably another $136 billion a year. Now, so we know what the AI will do, but the issue is how do we accelerate it?
Right.
So let me just share maybe 5 ideas that I think. First is, we need data. Without data, you don't have AI. So building that whole data ecosystem, and that's one of the things we said we'll do together, is important. Second one is just the skills, right? The skills, we need to have science, technology, engineering, mathematics, have a lot more women or girls actually going into these fields to remove another divide, which is gender-based divide in that particular area. I think that's important. So we are funding something called Coding for Employment. So we have about 130 centers of excellence that we are building to build digital skills. The other thing I think is just AI governance. How do you make sure people's data is very well done? So good policies, good regulation, and cybersecurity issue. And I think there's a lot of misunderstanding too on AI. So general public awareness about AI, it's not always going to make you lose jobs. It can actually complement jobs if you have well-trained people. And I think also just the kind of partnership we have, global partnerships to make AI work for everyone.
Let me add a few more things, certainly, that I see from our vantage point in the work we've been doing in the UN. I think giving Africans access to compute, to the models and the tools that are critical for AI development, so that African developers can also participate in developing and building AI systems and applications on the continent itself. That's one key part. I also think the work on building infrastructure, basic connectivity infrastructure, is fundamentally important. It's one of the reasons why we've been investing in all these cables, connecting all of Africa with itself, Africa with Europe, Africa with Asia. That's fundamentally important. But I also think we need to invest, as you said, on skills and people, but I'd also include within that supporting and funding entrepreneurs. So we actually, for example, created a Black Founders Fund, where so far we've funded over 120 startups, African startups that are building companies. So the more we can have a very vibrant AI ecosystem of developers and so forth, I think is fundamentally important. The other thing that I would also add, Dr. Adesina, is the fact that if we can have more research happening in Africa, so we opened, for example, a research center in Ghana and another one in Kenya, and we're now kind of involved with universities doing research. That's also a part that enables Africa and Africans to build their own skills.
No, I think
all of that's going to be quite important.
Yeah, but maybe 2 things just to add to what you're saying, and I agree with everything you said, is we need to have data centers all across.
That's true.
Big issue. But the other one, I think, is energy. The AI consumes a lot of energy. And today, we have a situation where 600 million Africans don't have access to electricity. And this is, for me, the most important thing. Is that, look, we have worked since I've been president of the bank to accelerate access to electricity in Africa. When we started our new deal on energy in 2016, Africa had 37% of the population with access to electricity. In 2022, that became 52%. Right. But we still have, we've connected about 93 million households to electricity, but we still have about 121 million households. That's about almost 448 million people to connect to electricity. So that's why I'm really excited about what myself and my brother Ajay Banga, president of the World Bank, we got together and we said, look, I told Ajay, Africa cannot grow in the dark, it cannot industrialize in the dark, it cannot be competitive in the dark. We have to solve that problem. And so that's why we've launched what's called Mission 300, which is to connect 300 million Africans to electricity by 2030. It's the biggest thing globally when it comes to sustainable development goals. And so we are working with the Global Energy Partnership on People and Planet, Rajshad, Rockefeller Foundation, and several others. And there's going to be a summit on this next year, January 25 to 27, 28 actually, in which we are developing what's called the energy compacts for each of the countries. So how do you get power generation, power distribution, the transmission distribution, and how do you have a better policy environment? You were talking private sector, that the cost reflective tariff allows you to make the investments necessary.
Absolutely.
And that we can also have a way of connecting the poor, last mile connectivity to that. So I think that Africa needs electricity. If we don't have electricity, we are not going to be able to do AI. So for me, it's not an issue for discussion. It's something we must do, and I'm confident that we'll get it done. Yeah.
Well, let me mention three, I know we're going to run out of time, three other things that I think are going to be pretty critical for us to do. One is something that I know you and I are both passionate about, which is fully establishing the Africa Free Trade Agreement.
Yeah.
That opens up and makes it easy for entrepreneurs and businesses to be able to do trade and business within Africa. It's quite stunning to me that, in fact, inter-Africa trade is very, very small, and that, in fact, even things like work visas for Africans to go and work in different countries. So I think we're going to have to solve that. I also think that, again, something else we're both working on, solving the issues around device financing and data costs for Africans is fundamentally important. Africa costs for data and devices are some of the highest in the world. It makes it easy, it makes it very difficult for people to fully participate in the digital economy when we don't have that. That's something else we're going to need to.
No, I fully agree with you on that. You know, on the Africa Continental Free Trade Area, I'm excited about what we're doing, but I think we need to move beyond trade. Okay, trade is important, but look, if I'm trading with you, sorghum, and you're trading maize with me, in a free trade area, we are both going to be competitively poor because we are not adding value. So what I want to say is that we must make the Africa Continental Free Trade Area an industrial manufacturing zone.
Yes.
That's where you can therefore have local, regional value chains for which you can be competitive in everything that you have. So it's not just it's more than trading. And I also want to agree with you on the issue of the
Devices and
devices. Yeah. And the devices, because, you know, today, the people that even have access to mobile, a lot of it is 2G, right? If you want to go, you have to go to 4G, and you guys are working on Androids and all of that. So we need to make it cheaper for people to be able to access that. But this month, I just want to say as we close, and I know our time is really over, I have a lot of, as I look to the future, that future, we have to put our capital behind the young entrepreneurs of today in Africa. Look, if you take a look at a young person that comes to commercial banks in Africa, you have a business idea. When they see you, what do they see? They see risk, 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 risk. All the reasons why you're not going to succeed. No, if we don't put our capital behind the ideation, the businesses and entrepreneurship in Africa, with 477 million young people, it will be the biggest risk we ever taken. And that's why the African Development Bank, I said, look, there's a lot of market failure and missing institutions in that particular area. How do you have 477 million without financing? So we are now rolling out what's called Youth Entrepreneurship Investment Banks. They are new financial institutions that will support the businesses of young people in a life cycle model. So I want there to be youth-based wealth in Africa, because If there's youth-based wealth in Africa, your fiscal space will expand, you create a lot more jobs, and I don't want young people going, I'm not against migration, but the future of Africa's young people is not in the United States, it's not in Europe, it's not in Latin America. It is in Africa growing well and putting its resources behind its demographic asset and turning that into a workforce of the world that can also be a big entrepreneurship zone for the world. So I think that's what we have to do.
That's what we have to do. And I think it's also worth remembering that a lot of those entrepreneurs are actually women. I've just been struck by the number of developers and entrepreneurs who are women. We have to find ways to fund them. But I know we're out of time, so we probably should wrap it up before they kind of come.
Yeah, no, since you mentioned women, I'll just say one thing. You know, you work in Rwanda, and I also work in Rwanda. So we're both friends of President Kagame. So I went to see President Kagame one day, and he said, look, he was jogging at 8:30 at night, and there was a young lady who was running in the opposite direction, who had actually attended the Kigali Institute of Science and Technology that we actually supported them to do. And he said, well, this lady came and said, look, the soldiers pushed her apart. And he said, the lady said, no, you supported me to go to Kigali Institute of Technology. I want to tell you what I want to do with my life. And so he said, the lady came to the office, I gave her a little bit of money. She disappeared for 2.5 years. She came back after 2.5 years to tell the president, well, thank you, because the business that I talked to you about, I just sold it for $21 million. And I told the president, please tell all African heads of state to jog at 8 o'clock at night.
Well, I think we should end it at this point on a high note, but thank you.
Thanks.
So much more we could have talked about.
Thank you, appreciate it. Thank you.
Take care.